Welcome to the Room at the Table podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Milo. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo. I have a new friend here today. Her name is Anna Webb. I'm really excited to chat with her because she works at Baylor University, or part of Baylor University, at another organization that is there on campus that my son has been a big part of for his undergraduate experience. So it's going to be a really neat conversation talking today about what does faithfulness really look like in terms of success in our lives, and also related to college and how these young kids who are becoming adults, how they can be rooted in faith. So Anna, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thanks for having me on. I've been really looking forward to it and just excited to get to have this conversation with you.
I'm happy to have you. Trey has spoken so highly of you and was, definitely, Mom, you have to have Anna on the podcast. He's really looked up to you. You've been a mentor to him and a friend. And so personally, just thank you for everything you've done for him and in friendship with him over the last 4 years.
Yes, well, that's sweet. I can't believe that he's officially graduating. I've been with Vertical, my campus ministry now, for almost 4 years. So Trey is one of those students we've really gotten to see grow up in life, in faith, and one of the joys and sad things of college ministry is getting to send them on to their next chapter. And so
I
uh,
know. I imagine that's very bittersweet when you are working at the collegiate level, whether it's, a staff member, teacher, vertical, an outside organization that comes in and does incredible ministry work, coach, whatever it is,
mhm.
working with the kids is just, they're not kids, they're young adults, I guess, by the time they graduate, but they feel like kids because their brains aren't done developing. And then you launch them off and just wish them well. So it's
Yeah.
got to be bittersweet.
It absolutely is. And like you pointed out, it's true of many professions, not just this one. But we always tell them that we're on their team and in their corner forever, that these relationships aren't just for 4 years. And although the
Hmm.
nature of that might change, we might live in a different city, we might see each other at a different frequency, like we are always for them wherever God leads them next. And so it is a bit happy and a bit sad.
But you guys are really like mentors to my son. And I'm guessing this is wherever kids go when they have a bond with somebody at their college. And especially if it's related to faith, you probably really seem like a big sibling in many ways, a mentor. So my hope is that when a student and a staff member, kind of like yourself, has that connection, that it keeps going, because that mentorship role is so important throughout life. Now that I'm older, I can look back and say, gosh, I wish I had nurtured some of those teachers that I really liked. And that could be a coach for someone, or someone like you in a, what do they call that? The para church organization kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what a unique opportunity to stay connected for a young adults blossoming and then throughout their life, and then repeat the mentorship process. So I'm imagining a lot of kids look at you in that way.
Oh, that's kind. And I mean, as I look back on my story, that's one of the reasons Vertical was so impactful in my life. I got to build relationships with people who really formed
Hmm.
me and shaped me in my faith. But also, as I think about my life post grad, the Lord's just continued to do that in every single season. And so it hasn't just been one single mentor or,
Hmm.
leader that's invested in me. There really has been people in every single season. And so even for these students, as they graduate and as they move on to what's next, as much as we stay in their lives, I hope that God continues to provide new people who are with
Hmm.
them where they are at. And so I think we just have an abundance of riches in life, and who the Lord brings to us. And so even as Trey, comes back home to California, hope that there's people in his world there that continue to invest in him.
Well, I hope so too. I pray for that for all my kids, and we're kind of diving in before I even got to do
Yeah.
any background on you, and we'll get to that. But what I want to say is, now that I'm watching my kids go through college, my older two and then younger two coming up, and all my friends and their kids, some are graduating from college, some are graduating from high school. It's the students who really are intentional and really go out and say, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to try this. I'm going to get to know my teacher or my coach or my mentor, and I'm going to kind of dive into them. Those are the students that are coming out feeling really fulfilled. Not that they have to love every aspect of their collegiate life, but they are making those connections that are rich for them in a plethora of areas, whether it's, academia or sports or, ministry. So, it's not every temperament of a young student who makes that effort. I probably could have made a lot more effort. So it's really neat when you find a young child, I guess, or teenager who kind of gets it and wants to invest back into those relationships so that they can kind of glean from them too. And then they give it back too. Like Trey has done a lot of leading of Bible studies and different things and tried to mentor people. So I just think you're a beautiful example for them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, ownership and initiative are those two traits that I think you're
Mm,
alluding to and describing. And that looks different for everyone based on their personality and temperament. But even
mhm,
think about and talk about faith, transitioning in our faith into the young adult years in college and beyond. Those
mhm.
people who really make that jump are those who are taking ownership and initiative
Yeah,
of
they're inspiring even to us old folk. So I like learning from the youth. But let's go back. I got to backtrack. I got so distracted in connecting with you about what you do, about your where you're from. So you graduated from Baylor also in 2019.
absolutely.
So you're a youngin as well. But you're from California. You're from San Diego. But this was really cool. I didn't know this about you. You competed as a student athlete on the acrobatics and tumbling team, winning 2 national championships. That is so cool. So you're a gymnast.
Yes, yes. I was a competitive gymnast all throughout my childhood. So from, 5 years old at a friend's birthday party to jumping in on a competitive team throughout high school. And then when I came to Baylor is when I made the transition to this sport called acrobatics and tumbling, which
Okay.
is essentially, I say, gymnastics and all-star cheerleading combined. And so
Mm.
they recruit from several different disciplines, artistic gymnastics, um, trampoline and tumbling, cheerleading, all things like that. And so it's a really sweet space because it was born out of just desiring to create more opportunities for women to compete at the collegiate level who
Mm.
have those backgrounds. And it just provides a space for uh, people, yeah, who have diverse skills and talents that don't maybe necessarily fit one single mold. And so I'm 5'10". I know you can't tell on this recording, which is not the typical height for a
Right.
gymnast. And so
Right.
I just had different challenges and difficulties with that. But acro created a space for me to just thrive in a different environment.
That's so cool, the acrobatics and, like, the cheerleading. When I have watched those cheerleading shows, those kids, because I know it's male and female, they are so
Mhm.
athletic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous, the training they do, the way their bodies can move, the strength that they need, the endurance. I mean, to me, I'm like, "Whoa, that's, like, almost the ultimate athlete," because they're just doing so many different things with their body.
And they
So
only, yeah, continue to get better. I mean, the skills and the things that we were doing when I was on the team just don't even scratch the surface to what they're up to now. So I am amazed by
ah.
that as well.
So interesting, and they're flying through the air. So it's like it's such so like, opposite of gravity. It's just, so awe-inspiring, like Cirque du Soleil, right? It reminds me of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, but then you served with vertical is what we're gonna talk about today, a big part of it anyway. So that was where your first introduction to kind of creating ministry, like a service on campus, is that right? Explain to everybody what vertical is, because that's the big part of what we're gonna talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. You've given a great introduction. So for people who aren't really familiar with Baylor or some of the campus ministries out there, Vertical is a campus ministry on Baylor University's campus that was started in 2009 by Baylor students for Baylor students. And so
Okay.
there's a lot of parachurch ministries out there that they might be familiar with, like FCA or Crew, Navigators,
Hmm,
ministries like that that are on campuses all over the world and all over the
hmm.
US. Vertical is unique in the sense that it is only on Baylor University's campus.
I see.
Yes. And so what we do is we host a weekly gathering for the university. And so every week, hundreds of students come out, and it really is this corporate unifying gathering of the student body. And the way that we
Mhm,
see it is every week we want to challenge them of how would our campus and how would our city look different if they
mm.
lived out God's word and really took ownership and initiative in their faith. And so It's super fun. I was involved with it when I was a student at Baylor. And so the way that vertical is structured is it's really led and run by students. And so we currently have about 75 college volunteers. So I was one of those when I was in college and got to see it from the student side, and then have been back for 3 years on the staff side.
And so is it a service? I know it's Monday nights and it's outside, right? It's outside in the center of campus.
Yes, yeah, we jump around a little bit, but a lot of our main venues are outside. So what a typical Monday looks like is there is some time of worship that in the last few years we've actually fully transitioned that to a college team. And so the people who lead worship on a Monday night are their peers. They are fellow college students. And so that's been a huge change for us as a ministry. We used to have some friends and outside musicians who would come in that maybe had a connection to Baylor, maybe just had a connection to staff, but it's been really fun to get to lean into creating more opportunities for college students to use their giftings and get to explore that area of their life that maybe they haven't had opportunities to before. And so there is a time of worship, and then we really just like to call ourselves a big Bible study, because the other portion of
Mm.
the night is opening God's word and diving into that together, and then being commissioned into the rest of our weeks.
So the kids are literally, you said there's hundreds of kids and they're all gathered. I know you have a stage, right? I'm just trying to paint the picture,
Yeah,
especially for kids who are
absolutely.
maybe
Yeah.
considering Baylor. And there's worship, obviously, like you said. And then who picks the curriculum and the scriptures and what you're actually studying and talking about? And do you have a pastor there?
Yeah, so we have 2 full-time staff, so I am one of them, and then, um, Miles Zielinski is our executive director, and so our 2 main jobs is we love to equip and empower students, and so,
Mm,
everything that we do, we try to do with and through students, and so, we have a sermon team of students, and they help prepare the message every single week. We get to sit around a
mm,
round table together, and we're diving into whatever the topic is that we're teaching, and they're giving ideas, they're giving their insights from the text, they're giving observations of what they think their peers need to hear, and then we kind
mm,
of have a rotation of people who actually teach on a Monday night. And so it's a combination of staff as well as some outside guests who can provide maybe a different perspective. So either they're from a different background or a different life stage that can speak
mm.
to students. And so um, that's kind of what it looks like gearing up to a Monday night. But it's really sweet. Like I said, really, it is a corporate gathering of Baylor University. And so students from all sorts of background are welcome. And I know that's kind of a theme of this podcast, is being welcome at the table. And
Mhm.
that is a core value of our ministry, is everyone from the student athlete to the international student to the sorority girl, that they would feel like they have a space to be with their peers, to be challenged by God's word, and to be
Mm.
activated in their faith the rest of the week.
Okay, got it. And then the volunteers, 75 of them, that's a lot. And I know Trey was involved with helping the volunteers. So what are they doing? Setting the stage up? Are there chairs? Like really, what are the volunteers are needed
Yeah,
for?
they're doing everything from, we have a team that comes at 5 p.m., which is the team that Trey served on for a long time, our roadies, and we have portable equipment, so very similar to how a church plant would operate. They're there at 5 p.m., laying down cords, setting up speakers,
Mm,
um, preparing so that our worship team can come in at 6:30 and start their rehearsal.
okay.
And so students serve on our worship team. They also serve with greeting, hospitality, a prayer team, outreach team,
Mm,
connect. And so those volunteers all kind of get there around 7:30. We do a team meeting, kind of group rally, and then the night really kicks off at 9 p.m. So
yeah, it's
that is
later.
late.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
For
later.
anyone that is not a college student, it is late, but it is on purpose because it removes every single excuse. There's no other meeting except for maybe intramurals.
Mm,
The fact they
mhm.
play intramurals at 10:30 p.m. It is
Oh,
mind
geez.
blowing to me.
My gosh.
But it removes every other distraction. that they maybe could have and allows them to be available for the night. And so our 75 volunteers, they serve on 8 different teams. Currently, that's what we have is 8 teams.
Wow.
And so basically, whatever your spiritual gift is or your passion is, we have a team for that. And so
Okay.
we always say one of the best ways to learn your spiritual gifts is to get in the game. And that is
Mhm.
a great process for discernment, is not just taking a test and looking at things on paper, but jumping in and actually using those skills and figuring out how is it that God wired you and how can you use that today, but also
Love
how
it.
can you use that for the rest of your life.
So good and so important. I love what you said about once you dive in, you can kind of explore what potentially your spiritual gifts are, what or where you want to grow, or what your passions are that maybe are uncovered that you just didn't even know you had. So it's a great way to do that. I'm part of R12, which is a mother,
Mhm.
daughter, father, son Christian service organization. And it's all about, the
Yeah.
different gifts, spiritual gifts. And so I love
Mhm.
what you said about just diving in and figuring it out, while you're in the process of figuring it out. So you obviously were part of Vertical when you were an undergrad. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, vertical was a huge part of my story when I was in college. So I went, like many students, the first day of my freshman year. And so
Okay.
if you talk to a lot of people at Baylor, they're like, yes, I went to vertical. Our kickoff is
Mm.
always the first day of school. And I actually had a teammate that was a vertical volunteer. And so she had sent out a message that was like, hey, I'm going to be here tonight. If any of you want to come, I'll save you a seat. And so as I came to Baylor, really desired to get plugged in with Christian community. And
Mhm.
so I was like, great, I will show up. I'll be there. And so went that first week, and it is in a building on campus called Waco Hall. And that's really just like our big auditorium theater. Building, and I walked in, as you said, I'm from California, and so, I had just never seen there was probably 1,000 students there. This first night, it
Wow.
was packed. I would not have had a seat if she didn't save me a seat, and I walked in, and it was the first time in my life that I had seen so many of my peers authentically seeking God, and I was just
Hmm.
blown away, and I would say that is a marker of Vertical as a whole, is just the zeal and the passion and the desire to seek God. That is kind of
Hmm.
the DNA of
Mhm.
what a Monday night is about. And so I walked in and I was just like, wow, I didn't know spaces like this existed. And I
Mhm.
think this is a place where I really could grow and where I could really meet God during my college years. And so I went
Yeah.
back every single Monday after that, and eventually started serving as a volunteer about 2 years into my college experience. Served on leadership in different capacities. And for me, as you said, I was in athletics, and it really was the one spot where I could be connected to the student body. In athletics, I
Mm.
tell people all the time, you kind of just have these blinders on.
Mhm.
I lived with my teammates. I went to class with my teammates. I went to practice with my teammates. Like, you really do operate in a bubble that can be hard to
Mhm.
break out of. And so vertical for me was this one spot every single week where I could feel like I was a part of the
Wow.
greater Baylor community, and be invested in, as I went back to that space the other 6 days of the week.
That's such a great point because I was not a collegiate athlete, but I have many friends whose kids are, and I had some friends who were, but I never thought of it from the perspective of you're kind of in a pocket, for
Mhm.
your team or the athletic part of your college. You're not necessarily always connected to the other aspects of the student body, especially with faith. It must have been pretty powerful for you to say, "Oh, here's where the rest of the
Yeah.
students are who
Yeah.
have share my same beliefs." When you got to Baylor, were you already as strong in your faith, or were you just like a light Christian? What was your background, and is
Yeah,
that why you
totally.
chose Baylor?
Yeah, so I grew up in a home. My parents are believers, and so they raised us, introducing us to the Christian faith and to biblical values. And so I, as a child, always experienced going to church every single week and those sorts of things. And so I was introduced to Jesus at an early age, and I believe had a desire really to have a relationship with him from elementary school on. And kind of those teenage years, early teenage years, was just discovering what that
Mhm.
actually meant. And
Mhm.
I would say it was around my senior year of high school that I just like had this light bulb moment um, of wow, Jesus isn't just a historical figure to know, but he's a savior that I need.
Mhm.
And that was just my tension in my own sin as a teenager was like I knew Jesus came to die for sinners, but I didn't see myself as one.
Mm.
The early 2000s, the church defined sin as sex, drugs, and alcohol. And I was like, well, I'm not doing those things explicitly, so I don't know where I really fit in here, but had a
Great
lot
point.
of, pride and lust and self-righteousness that existed in my life that the Lord just kind of took those blinders off when I was a senior in high school. And I was like, wow, like Jesus died for me. He died for the whole
Mm.
world and he died for me. And I need him
Mhm.
as my savior. And so that was kind of a huge moment in my faith. And then I came to Baylor really because I desired to be at a university with Christian values. And so I looked
Mhm.
at quite a few schools in California um, who also embodied that, but I was a business major. And so Baylor was this best of both worlds where I could go to a school and have like a true university experience, but
Mhm.
also be in an environment that would foster my faith. And so that is ultimately how I ended up at Baylor. It's a kind of a crazy story. I feel like my life has just these huge moments of like, I'm going to make this huge jump and it's going to be a leap of faith and we're going to see how it works out on the other
Mm.
side. So I had never been to Waco, had never toured Baylor before my
Wow.
freshman year. I showed up for registration and orientation. That was my first time on campus. And I was like, okay, God, this is this
So
is where I'm going to be for 4 years.
wow, I mean, were you looking online? Did you have any
Yeah.
sense kind of you
So
had talked to
I
some people who had been there?
yeah, not really because it's not super common to go to Baylor at the high school that I was at. I think
Mm.
I had known one other person who was several years older than me, who went there. And so I um okay, I can get into the story. Basically, I thought I was gonna go to school in California, got in, felt pretty unsettled about it and was just like continuing to pray. And I was like, God, like, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to be? Woke up the
Mhm.
next morning and had an email from Baylor Admissions in my inbox asking me to apply their marketing team. It worked. They did it.
Wow. Wait,
And
that's a
so,
thing where they actually ask
yeah,
I mean, I
so
know they
based on your
advertise,
in the
but
old days when you were required to take the SAT and ACT, they would like not sell your test results, but people like
mhm.
universities email you based on like your SAT, ACT scores or something like that. And so you just get like I just remember being a senior in high school and getting spam emailed by all these colleges that were like apply, apply, apply. Anyway, so Baylor ends up in my email inbox and I look at it online and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I've been looking for those 2 reasons that I just
Wow.
explained was like, wow, I can go and have a university experience. They have a football team. The campus body is, 16,000, not 1,600, things like
Mm.
that. And like, wow, it truly is a university that has been committed to their faith foundation since the beginning.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I looked at it online, just kind of looked through Baylor's website and prayed about it. And this is crazy. I was on the way home from a gymnastics meet my senior year of high school in the In and Out drive through line. Praise God for In and Out.
It
Uh,
always comes back to In and Out.
yes, it always, and I turned to my mom and I was like, I want to go to Baylor. And she
Wow.
was like, "Do you wanna go visit?" And I was like, "No, I know what the university stands for. I can get used to a campus or a city, but this is where I'm supposed to be." And
Wow.
so we went home and submitted the deposit that night.
That's amazing. Like,
Mhm,
you really had a intuition that this was where God wanted you to be. Obviously, you were praying, but your faith
mhm.
was strong enough that you trusted, "I need to listen to that whisper that was saying, 'This is your
Yeah.
place.'"
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a huge leap. I mean, I was thousands of miles away from home, didn't really know anyone. in Texas. And so that definitely was
Wow.
a season that grew my faith.
That is so great, and that's encouraging to a lot of, I would say, seniors today who might hear this podcast is you need to be prayerful about
Mhm.
where does the Lord want you and to listen to that voice even when it doesn't necessarily always make sense. Like, you didn't have all
Yeah,
the answers. You'd never been there. You didn't know anybody who went
totally.
there. You know, you had no sense of, "I'm gonna be out of state. What would that feel like?"
Sure.
You just thought, "Okay, Lord, I'm trusting you." So good for you for diving in. So then you graduated 2019
Mhm.
and then you're back in school now, right? You're getting your seminary
Yeah,
degree. Yeah.
I will graduate in May for the second time, which is super
Wow.
exciting. Yes, I cannot believe I'm already in the home stretch. I will graduate from Dallas Theological Seminary
Okay,
with a
that's what it was.
degree. It's a Master of Arts in Christian Leadership. So took me about
Incredible.
2.5 years to complete. Been doing school full time while working full time. So it's been a journey. God has sustained us.
So great.
Um,
So
and
in vertical, one of the things that we had I'm excited to talk more about this concept, which to me makes a lot of sense, but I haven't heard it said so
yeah,
succinctly, is success, especially for high school kids going to college and then college kids graduating and realizing I've got to live my life and pay my bills and get a job and do all the things that an adult does, and they want to be successful. And so it doesn't matter what transition or phase of life you're in, you always, if you have an instinct and a passion, a desire to do well, which as humans we do, we want to survive and thrive, not just survive, but thrive. Success for you is defined as faithfulness. And so I can't wait for you to dive into what that really means, especially kind of how this has formed your Baylor experience, your vertical experience really specifically has formed that concept for you because that's a
yeah,
big shift. Like our culture says success is I've got the money, I've got the
yeah,
home, I've got all the status symbols, I've got the car. And I'm not even talking about being a really wealthy person, but you have enough means to provide for yourself, which of course we need to survive. And God wants us to have abundance in that way where we have dominion. But really, success is a different definition for you based on what you've seen and what you're doing with your degree and vertical. So, talk to me about when and how you've defined success as
yeah,
faithfulness.
absolutely. Well, like you said, the world defines success as enter whatever metric of achievement you want to, and that's how they define success. And really,
Mhm.
I learned this the hard way because
Mhm.
I don't like to identify as a perfectionist, but obviously, growing up in the sport of gymnastics, it is a sport
Mm.
that is based on perfection. And so from my
Mm.
childhood on, I was evaluated on how perfectly I could complete things. And so, as much as I wanted that to just be compartmentalized into one area of my life, it really did start to seep out into
Mhm.
every area, whether that was academics or friendships or my relationship with God. It really was a works based
Interesting.
definition of success. And so I really wrestled with that all throughout my teenage years and even into my post grad years. And I came to this point probably about a year after I graduated from college, and I just was crippled with the fear of failure. And
Mm.
it really had like a stronghold on my life, a grip on my life, because I could not separate difference between failure as an event and failure who I was as a person. And
Mm.
so whenever I came up to a situation where I was like off the slightest bit or I didn't meet my own personal expectations, it would just paralyze me for
Mm.
days. Like I would spiral out of control mentally. And it kind of just like came to a point where I was like, I can't continue to live the rest of my life like this. Because I think God has so much more for us than this. And so I was in a residency program at the time. So I actually can't take credit for coining this definition.
Mm.
But as I went through this residency program, this was really the one takeaway that I had that really changed the trajectory of my life. And
Mhm.
the last, I would say, 5 years has just been putting this to the test and seeing what it really means and refining kind of my mentality around that. And so because I had such a bad definition of failure, it also meant that I had a bad definition of success. And so, because now that I've redefined that in some ways, I have a better just view of what is true failure and what is true success. And so, there's kind of two key places in scripture as I've seen over the last 2 years where I've seen this principle at play. The first is in First Corinthians 4. And if there's one verse in the Bible that I could sum up leadership with, it just says it's Paul talking after First Corinthians 3 is talking about divisions in the church and how different people were kind of backing Apollos or Paul as like their favorite leader or the person who was most important in the church. And it has that classic verse of, Apollos watered, Paul planted, but God gave the growth. So that's kind of what's
Mhm.
leading into
Mhm.
it. But it continues on into chapter 4 and it says, "This is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful." And I was
Mm.
like, this isn't just like a leadership axiom that someone said, once.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, that's like a really fun line. I'm going to write that down. Like it really is in the Bible. And so
So
I'm like,
good.
man, like this is the one verse that I want to define my leadership, that I want to be known as a servant, and I want to be known as a steward. That
So good.
for our uh, volunteer team, Mark 10:45 is one of our key verses. It's that Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and to give
Mhm.
ransom for many.
Mhm.
That we see Jesus as the ultimate servant leader. And so ultimately, I'm like, Jesus is the one and God's the one who gets the glory, not me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just get to stand in the gap
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people to him. And so sometimes that's super flashy and sometimes it's not. And
Not at
so
all. Right.
I want to be a servant, but I also want to be a steward, that I want to be someone who faithfully uses everything that God has given me. And ultimately, we're stewards of the gospel. And in every area of my life, from my work to my relationships, to my roommates, to my family, so that I'm
Mhm.
steward of the gospel in every sphere of influence that God has given
Beautiful.
me. And
So
then
beautiful.
holistically, as we do that, we're called to be found faithful. And so, kind of the
Mhm.
definition that I've come up with for what does it mean to be faithful? You're like, yes, Anna, that's a super churchy word. What does it really mean? And the definition that I've really come up with is faithfulness is doing the best you can with what you have and trusting God with the result. And
So
so, kind
good.
of those 3 points. Point one is doing the best you can. Point two being with what you have. And then three is trusting God with the results. So I can dive into that more. But do you have
So
any questions?
good. Yeah, I mean, my mind is like, I have so many questions, but the last part of that was doing the best you can with what you have and trusting, you said, and
God with the
trusting
result.
God with the result, right. Exactly. I feel like I'm literally in the middle of that, doing that with, this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanna back up a little bit, and you were talking about your perfection and how as an athlete, you were always judged. And I think any athlete listening to that
Yeah.
can feel that way. I've gotta have my perfect baseball swing when it's the perfect throw,
Mhm.
this swing, your bat has to hit the ball in this way when it's this type of swing. Whatever sport you're in, there's that finite perfection to win, to be successful. But even if you're not an athlete, if you're a
Yeah.
musician or an
Mhm.
actor or a baker, it doesn't even matter,
Mhm.
like we like a measure, a metric, right? So that we can judge ourselves. So how do these young kids, especially with social media, especially with it's so hard to get into college, it's so hard to compete in especially in American culture to make
Mhm.
it into a college that has the major you want or the sport you want or the size you want. How do you get a young mind to drop that metric when that's really all you know developmentally? I don't know if it's possible, is kind of what I'm saying, because what you went through is what I think 95% of American
Yeah.
kids go through, right? I need to be
Absolutely.
perfect. to be
Absolutely. Like
successful.
you said, America is a very achievement based culture. And so that's why I'm like,
Mhm.
you can pick whatever metric of achievement you want, fill in the blank for whatever your vocation is or your life stage. For someone that is still in middle school or high school, a lot of times it's your GPA or the organizations that you're a part of or the leadership opportunities that you have in them. Everything from someone who's working in sales and making sure they're hitting their numbers every single month to get their bonus to, even a mom who's like, I want my kids to be obedient and I want
Yeah.
them to listen the first time. And I want to have this reputation of being this
Mhm.
type of mom. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's not hard to find an alternate definition of success or metrics of success. And how do we break out of that? I mean, for me, it really took hitting rock bottom. This
And
is why
what
I'm
did that look like
split.
for you? I
Yeah.
don't mean to interrupt you, but, like, I wanna get granular 'cause for kids who are about to graduate or are starting their college career or, I don't when I mean graduate, I mean from college or graduating from high school. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, and one thing I tell people all the time too is you don't like graduate from your definition of success, it just changes. And so if you're
Mm.
struggling with defining success in middle school and high school, like that's going to follow you into college. That's going to
Mm.
follow you into your young adult life. It's not something you just graduate and move on from, and that's why it's so
Mhm.
important to get so clear on it. And we were just
Mm.
training our new leadership team the other week, and ultimately, like, we get to choose how we define success. And that might be different than the world's definition. That might be different from culture's definition. But if you don't choose your definition of success, the world's going to define it for you or someone
Okay.
else is gonna define it for
Okay.
you. We, as believers, as Christians, can so easily just default to the world's definition of success. And so it's not even that people have chosen the wrong definition, they
Right.
just defaulted to the wrong.
Unconsciously, right. We're just
It's a
going.
subconscious decision, and
Mhm.
so that would be my challenge to them. It's just like, "Hey, what does it look like to wake up and actually think about what are the standards that I want to live my life by?" Because it is a
Mhm.
slippery slope that you can get into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and life is just keeping up with the Joneses and
Mhm.
so many other things. And I think you talked about this before we jumped on, but one lesson that I learned in college that I think really helps inform this definition of success for me is I actually quit athletics after 2 years. And
Mm.
that was a moment that I really saw as a huge failure. Like, it was
Oh,
one of
wow.
my like biggest failures in my life up till that point. Like, I had never quit anything before. Like, a perfectionist doesn't
Mm.
quit something. And so I really wrestled with that. And it's still something I'm like, I don't like to tell people that. Um,
Mhm.
but
That's so normal. I mean, I
yeah,
I worry about that with the kids I know who are athletes, and it's so joyful for them and hard, and it's a
mhm,
problem-solving situation where they're always trying to be better and work on everything, and it's like you get used to that way of living. That's
totally.
your mode of operating. So when that is gone, there's gotta be a grief and a sense of, "I lost that," or if you choose to give it up early like you did at
Yeah.
2 years in, it's gotta be even harder.
Yeah. And so in that moment, I was in my room praying the night before I went to talk to my head coach. This was the day before my junior year at Baylor. And I had texted my head coach. I was like, hey, I need to come in for a meeting tomorrow. And I'm just like, God, what am I about to do? And I just
Mm.
remember praying this prayer of, God, I have counted up the cost and you are worth it all.
Wow.
And in that moment, I was like, I have counted up the cost of what quitting this sport looks like. And that feels so like surface level. There's so much more suffering in the world or other things. But my time in athletics was not all sunshine and rainbows. It was difficult and the Lord refined me a lot through it. But kind
Mhm.
of coming out of my sophomore year, I was like, God, I really see this as a place you have me on
Mhm.
purpose. Like, I'm committed to being here, however you choose to use it. And so then to go complete 180 to I'm feel like I'm supposed to leave. Um, I was like, I felt like I
Mm.
really was giving up something, that I was sacrificing something to follow God. again into a season
Mm,
of unknown. Like, I wasn't
interesting.
quitting to go do something else. It wasn't like, "Oh, I have this incredible opportunity," and the 2 just conflict, and I can't. It just was like, "I'm dropping off the face of the earth over here."
Was this that you felt that he was telling you it was
Yeah,
time to put it
yeah,
aside, and why was that? I just wanna talk
yeah.
about it because I think a lot of people can relate to this as athletes.
Yes, I know the calling of God is so mysterious, and people are like,
Mhm,
"How do you actually know?" And so we won't get too much into that, but I didn't know. I just had a resolve and a conviction, and, for me, that is how I feel the Lord speaking to me is
mhm,
I feel
mhm.
like He puts a resolve in my soul that I,
Got
like,
it,
can't shake, and so it's not
got it.
always this audible voice
Right.
from God situation, the clouds are parting and the
Yeah,
fire's
yeah,
in front of us.
right.
But for me, it is like just a internal resolve that
Okay,
even though this makes absolutely no sense, it
right.
is what I'm supposed to do. And so that was, what happened when I came to Baylor the first time. That's what happened when I left athletics, and it's happened additional times since then. And so I just had this internal resolve of like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And
Mm,
I have no reason why. And that's why I really struggled with the decision because I could not justify myself to other people. That when
mm.
other
I
people
see.
asked me, why are you leaving athletics? I couldn't be like, "Oh, because I'm going to X, Y, or Z opportunity." I just straight up looked like a quitter. Like, I just was like,
Right.
"Peace out," which was not my character at all, and so
Well,
it was really humbling to be like, "I can't justify to you other than I am being obedient to God why I'm making this
so you
decision."
were comfortable to tell people, "I just know it's not my time has come to an end in the
Yeah.
sport."
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that's ultimately which was really hard in this context because, even at Baylor, most universities, athletics is a very secular environment, and so I didn't have a lot of
Mm,
teammates or people in that area of my life who were following God, and so,
okay.
I walked into my coach's office the first day of my junior year, and I was like, "Hey, I'm sorry I can't come back this year," and she obviously asked the next most natural
Yeah.
question, "Why?" And I was like,
Mhm.
"'Cause God told me." And she just, like, doesn't have a framework for that, doesn't have a
Right.
concept for that. And I was like, "I know
Right.
you're not gonna understand this, but,
Hmm.
this is why."
Yeah.
And
Well, good
so,
for you for being I mean, you were pretty young
I mean, 20 years old, yeah.
to say that and to
Uh-huh.
trust it, but also then you struggled with, I
Yes.
feel like I'm
Yeah.
failing at something.
Totally, and so it was a very disorienting process
Mhm.
because, 1, I always joke with people, I say I had 2 freshman years at Baylor. I had my actual freshman year, and then my junior year really was a second freshman year
Interesting.
because I walked out of our locker room, and I knew maybe 2 other people on Baylor's campus, like, that's how
Wow.
siloed my life was, and so I was like, I had never personally registered for classes before, like, the athletics department does that,
Yes. Right,
and so
right.
I went home and I was like, "I have no friends. I guess I will wake up and go to class tomorrow, but
That's
I,
so
like, don't know
hard.
how to operate as a normal student on Baylor's campus."
That is such a
Um,
good point. What a great
yeah.
point. It's almost like being a transfer.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. So it was
Wow.
disorienting in that sense, and then it was really disorienting for my identity because even
Mm.
as I went to go meet people, we do this all the time in life. Whenever we meet people, it's "Hi, my name is," and then "I do blank." And so
Right,
in
right.
college, it's "Hi, my name is," and "I am in this organization," or "Hi, my name is," I am this major." And for me, it was
Mhm,
always, "Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm in athletics. I'm on the acro team. I am a
mhm.
gymnast." And so, um, sports was always attached to that identity statement. And so, in
I
that
have
season, I just met people. I'm like, "Hi, I'm Anna, and I have nothing to bring to the
nothing to
table. It's
follow it
just
up on.
me. Take it or leave it."
Right. You know,
um,
I can really appreciate that because one of my children has a stutter, and
mhm,
when he's gone through different hard parts of his life, and whether that's, in baseball or friends or his stuttering or whatever it is,
mhm,
I mean, we've really had to get down to your stutter doesn't define you, and guess
yeah,
what? Your baseball doesn't define you, and guess what? Your academics don't define you, and
Mhm,
you really get down to if you had nothing, and this is what I wanna ask people who really are achievement oriented, and
mhm.
which, I mean, all of us are to some degree, but some
Yeah.
people, that's really what they focus on.
Mhm,
What do you do? What successes have you had? If you take all that away,
mhm.
you are still worthy because
Yeah.
you're here and the Lord made you in his image.
Mhm.
And so when you have somebody who's really struggling with their identity, whether it's an athlete or someone who stutters or whatever it is, a physical disability, I mean, you really have to challenge that stuff and really think
Yeah.
about who am I without the good parts of me and the hard parts of me. And you're worthy because you're here and God intended for you to be here. And this is who he says you are. I don't think a lot of human beings think about that, and you
Mhm.
really had to face that when you
Yeah.
chose to drop that part of your identity, which gave you a lot of affirmation and confidence,
Mhm.
I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, it comes down to your worldview, and all these things. They all come full circle. They all fit together because one of the reasons I love college ministry. I know we didn't really fully dive into that solely, but it's because you get to meet students at this intersection point in their life where
Mhm.
they're making these really big decisions of this is how I was raised. This is what I was taught. These are the
Mhm.
values that I was hold. These are the values that I hold. And I'm now having these new experiences. I'm meeting people from different backgrounds, and I'm having to reconcile what do I know and what do I actually believe. And so
Mhm.
sometimes that's theological concepts and things like
Right?
but oftentimes it has to deal with our identity. And is it, hey,
Mhm.
am I gonna believe these false narratives or these other labels that other people have projected on me? Or am I gonna
Right.
believe the truths of scripture and what God says about me? And so I think college and that happens for different people at different points in their life. That does
Mhm.
unfortunately for people who experience a lot of trauma or suffering
Yeah.
in their upbringing, that happens a lot earlier. But,
Mhm.
um,
That's right.
college is kind of that natural transition point when you're
Mhm.
outside the home, you're in a different environment, where you're kind of sorting through all of those things and untangling
Yes.
those things. And so sometimes it takes hitting a rock bottom moment, but sometimes it's just, taking the fish and moving it from one tank to another to see
Mm.
the world in a whole new light. And so college ministry is really sweet because you get to just walk alongside students as the Holy Spirit takes them on that journey.
Mhm. So
I
it must
don't
be so fun to witness
Yes, yeah.
and pour into and be a part of.
Mhm. Yeah,
So that was really a turning point for you when you chose not to return to your sport, where you had to redefine what is success.
yeah, for sure.
And it was at the beginning of you challenging and realizing maybe it's more about my faith and being faithful?
Yeah, I think that definitely was a turning point. Like I said, definitely for my identity because I couldn't attach my identity to the form of achievement that I had
Right,
for my entire
right.
life. Now, but like I said earlier, I could have just taken that and shifted it to the next thing of my GPA or
Right,
X, Y, or Z.
right.
And obviously, I ultimately ended up on the route into ministry, which was another, crazy God ordained story, but
Mhm.
was a business major, ended up going into ministry, graduating. But just being in a ministry environment doesn't mean that there aren't false, metrics of success in ministry either. And so,
Yeah, for sure.
uh,
Because 'cause we're human and that's just what we
yeah,
do.
because 'cause we're human and, like, for example, like, people ministry can be really intangible. We're talking about life change.
Mm.
And there are oftentimes, external outcomes that demonstrate an internal change, but a lot of times you're just walking the messy middle with people,
Isn't that
and you
true?
don't get to just see the full story in the span of even 4 years of what God's
Right.
gonna do in someone's life. And so in those times of the intangible, it's really easy to desire to cling to tangible metrics. So,
So
the number
true.
of people that show up on a Monday night or the number of streams on something or,
That's
you
so
know,
true.
oftentimes it's attributed to numbers. And so I say
Mhm.
all that to say is like, I believe my personal journey with defining success, it really started I would say it personally for me when I was a junior in college and then has continued professionally
Got
as
it.
I've kind of been in the ministry context for the last 6 years.
Well, and you're getting to really witness, whether it's students or now that you're in graduate school or just the work that you do, you're getting really to see people's faith be put into action
Mhm.
and that becoming rewarding for them. And then
Yeah,
you're realizing, well, that is success because
yeah,
they're happy, they're helping people, they're
yeah,
thriving, they have a joy that comes out of them, they're healthy. I mean, you're really getting to witness, like you said, kind of the intangible successes that are really more enduring
yeah.
than
Yeah.
the
Tell people
job that
all the
mhm.
time, my number one goal for a college student when they graduate is that they would know that following Jesus is worth it and that they would know that it's a ton of fun. And so,
Mm,
following Jesus is worth it. It is going to come at a cost and it is going to come at a sacrifice. And that looks different in every stage of life. It does look like going against the cultural norm. It
so
might
true.
look like going against your parents' expectations on certain things. And so you're going to have to continually count the cost. But we do that because Jesus did that for us first.
Mhm.
Sacrificed
So
everything
good.
for
Well, and that
us.
doesn't end, Anna. I mean, like, I'm 53,
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're in your 20s, and
Mhm.
this doesn't end. Like, this process just keeps going when you
Yeah.
are a believer because that's now how I define my life is, okay, well, he told me to do it, and that
Mhm.
looks different for everybody. How you hear
Yeah.
from him, there can be some similarities in there, but it really depends on your level. I think your level of faith, where your walk is in your faith
Mhm.
and your temperament. But I'm struggling with all of that with whatever I'm doing too, with trying to listen to him and not getting to see the measure of, is this
Mhm.
working? Does this not
Mhm.
work? How do I know? Then I grasp at the numbers for something like, well,
Yeah.
maybe this could show me that I'm doing well enough. And it's just that is a constant journey in life because
Yeah.
your seasons of life change.
Mhm.
You're a master's degree student right
Mhm.
now. And then, maybe one day you'll be married and have kids, and then you'll be in that season. And then maybe one day you'll be an empty nester and you're at season. Like the point is, I think the Lord always has us evolving into different levels of faithfulness, of listening to him if you're hungry for him. If
Mhm.
you're hungry for him and you're chasing after him, that can be a different look, but it's the same process
Yeah.
of trusting, humbling yourself, kinda dying to yourself of, like, what you feel like you should do, what the world tells you what you should be doing right now versus what he's telling you to do,
Mhm.
and you kinda have to trust and feel wonky and do it anyway and not sure if it's gonna work, and anyway, I when you brought it up, it just reminded me, well, I'm in that process right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, um, circling back to that definition, I think one of the reasons it's so helpful is it does give you some tangibles in an intangible world. And so,
Mhm.
like, looking at the definition again, faithfulness is doing the best you can. And so,
Yeah.
what that looks like is, doing things wholeheartedly with diligence and integrity. Like, that is how I
Mm.
define doing the best that I can, is doing it wholeheartedly, not half-heartedly, not, um, lazily, but doing it wholeheartedly with diligence and integrity. And
Love
so,
that.
whatever your role is, or whatever your life stage is, like whatever it is that God has entrusted to you,
So
are
good.
you doing that wholeheartedly? And then the second part, like that is something at the end of the day when you lay your head on the pillow, like you can ask yourself that question and have a pretty clear answer. Like that isn't super intangible. Like you can come up with tangibles around that. And then the second part is with what you have. And the reality
Yeah.
of life is like we always are going to have constraints. Like we only have 24 hours on a day. In a day, you may only have X number of dollars in your bank account. Like we all don't just have endless resources
Right.
available to us. But did I do the best I can with what God has given me? And so, like,
Mhm.
for you with this podcast, it's like, I only have a specific mic or this editor. I don't have a full-time marketing team,
Exactly.
like you don't have just endless and endless, but it's
That's
like, hey,
right. That's right.
did I steward well back to that First Corinthians 4 language? Did I steward well what God has given me, regardless of
Yes,
how
yes.
much it is? And yes, we can always do more with more, but with what I have in front of me right now, did I use
So
every ounce
good.
of it? Was I creative? Did I come up with solutions? Things like that. And
So
then the
good.
last part truly is the hardest part, which is trusting God with the result. Just like in First Corinthians 3, it says that God gives the growth in ministry. I know it's the Holy Spirit who produces transformation in people's lives. But this is the part where we really have to release control and just say, God, I
Mm,
believe like you're writing a bigger story than what I can see in this moment right
so
now.
good.
And so even though I'm not seeing, the explosion of followers that I thought I would,
Right,
like, God,
right.
I gave you my yes and I followed through. And doesn't this
Mhm.
automatically mean it's going to be,
Right.
uh, quote unquote successful?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so like being like, hey, God, if
So
this is
good.
what you've called me to, Romans 8, like you're working all things together. And
Yeah.
although the outcome of this might look different than what I thought it would, like, I'm trusting with you with however you're using it and choosing, to use
So
it.
good. So you've really taken the word faithful into 3 parts, doing the best you can with what you have and trusting God with the result. And then you redefine that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
doing the best you can means doing it wholeheartedly with diligence and integrity.
Mhm,
With what you have, meaning given your resources,
mhm,
are you stewarding them well, doing it to the best of your ability, and then trusting God with the result is remembering it's God's job to grow
mhm.
you. You're releasing the control and surrendering it still to him. So
Yeah.
that's God, that's such a powerful. Are you gonna write a book?
Uh,
It's like,
and it just has been life changing for me because like I said, I now know like whenever I walk out on a vertical on a Monday night, regardless of how
Mhm.
things went, if I ask
Yeah,
myself those 3 questions, like, I can have so much inner peace
I
that
was
I
gonna say
never
peace.
experienced before
Yeah.
in my life when I was defining things by numbers um, and you just see
Mhm.
failure has a whole different definition when faithfulness is your definition of
Gosh,
success.
that's so true. Failure has a whole different definition when faithfulness is your definition of success.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so good. I really need you to write this like a paper or book or something
Oh,
because I was, like, taking notes as you're saying all
yeah.
this. What a comprehensive, grace-giving, yet
Mhm.
truthful way to look at it. Like, this is such a important part for young adults especially, or anybody in a transition, but young adults who are forming their lives, whether they're going to college, graduating college, or graduating graduate school. I mean,
Yeah.
this is so if we could keep that in the forefront of our mind, it would really free us up to do more, to make it easier to do
Mhm.
what God wants you to do. It doesn't mean that he's gonna make you a nun. You know what I mean? You think, "Oh, I
Yeah.
wanna be a rock star," and like, "Well, no, I have to be a nun." Like, that's
Mhm.
he knows, like, what your personality is. He
Mhm.
knows what you need to make sense of a relationship with him, and if you just kind of start to follow him and then gently keep trusting and trusting. I just love what you're saying about this because it's not scary
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah,
not
and that's
overwhelming.
yeah, what's so beautiful of it is it applies to anyone and everyone regardless of the scenario. And we didn't get to dive into it, but the parable of the sower, it's mentioned a few
Mm,
times in the Gospels. Luke 8 is one of them. It's
mhm,
really, I think, a story that illustrates these principles that if you're not familiar with the story, essentially it talks about how there is a sower who goes out and they scatter seed, and the seed falls on different types of soil. Some of it is rocky, some of it is thorny, some of it is
mm,
hard, and some of it is good soil. And the seeds that fall on the bad soil end up, withering or dying out, and the seeds that fall on the good soil yields 100-fold. Like it's very, very
mm, mhm,
and from the story, right, the sower, he did the best that he could. Like God was like, you go put these seeds in the ground. And so he did it. He did it regardless of what the soil was. He covered his entire land. And he did it fully. Um, and what was entrusted him was the seed. And so he used what was given to him, which is the seed. And there's obviously spiritual implications that the seed is the gospel, but for the story, doesn't
Mhm,
necessarily matter.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, no,
And
it
then
could be anything, yeah.
trusting God with the result of the sower couldn't control what type of ground is there. And so I often use this story talking about like pastoral care. And so if we're counseling someone, like I can't change someone's heart. I can't change whether they're hard hearted or whether they're soft hearted, just like the sower couldn't change whether the ground was thorny or good
Mhm,
soil.
mhm,
Uh, but ultimately, I'm going to do what God asked me to do, which is to sow the seed or share the gospel. And I'm going to trust God with whatever comes of that. And so
mhm,
um,
mhm.
that is just a story in the Bible or another place people can continue to go, like leaving this conversation if they're like, wow, like you just presented something brand new to me. And what does this actually mean? Like that'd be a great story to sit with and look at how would that apply to my life.
It's yeah, it's just so important, and, when you talk about the intangibles, you can get a tangible from an intangible. The tangibles are so appreciated
Mhm.
when you're doing God's work and you're not really supposed to know what he's doing with it. It's kind of none of your business. It's kind
Mhm.
of like, you have your relationship with him. You do the best you can with what you have, knowing that he will grow it and or not, or whatever he's going to do with it. It's not really for you to know because
Yeah.
it's him. He's the source. He's our father. But when you do get a tangible, like someone saying, "I love what you did there," or you get that affirmation, or you get, "Oh, I'm listening to your podcast," or, "Oh, I read your
Mhm.
paper that you wrote and it really like those nuggets become so gold
Mhm.
because when you're doing it for the Lord, you're wrestling a little bit with your flesh and then, your soul doing the
Mhm.
Lord's work. And so it's nice when the flesh can get a little bit of that affirmation of I am on the right track. People are getting fruit. The Lord is watering this and nourishing the land, and I'm doing my part and putting the seed in there, and He's making growth happen. It's really, really rewarding to hear those
Yeah.
tangibles. And I feel like you get to see those tangibles when
Yeah.
a student's
I
life
always
starts to
yeah,
flourish.
tell people I have the best job in the world because we get to see so much fruit, and I worked in student ministry prior to this job, so with middle school and high
Mm,
school students, and talk
okay.
about sowing seeds. Like, if you are a youth pastor or even if you are a small group leader, volunteer, like, you are sowing seeds
Yes.
into kids' lives that
Right.
most of the time you never see the fruit
Right.
of. Like,
Right.
Johnny's in
Right.
his corner picking his nose. Sally's over here gossiping about so and so. These boys are in a fight over here. And you're like, what are we even doing here?
I
And
know.
you are sowing seeds into their life. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, like those have sprouted and are blooming once they get to college and beyond. And so
Yeah.
I honestly, there's another verse in the Bible where it just talks about, it's in the book of John, kind of at the end of the story of the woman at the well, where it's like you reap what you do not sow. And I feel like
Mm.
fruit of things that were sown by mentors and parents and friends when they were in middle school and high school. And it's just humbling to be like, I didn't invest this in this person, but I'm getting to see the fruit of it. Um,
Yeah,
and it's
so
incredibly
great.
rewarding, but also incredibly humbling at the same time.
And sometimes I almost think too, when somebody will say, "Oh, well, we had a miracle. This happened over here, or that happened here," and I think in my mind, I go to, "Well, somebody was probably praying."
Mhm. Yeah,
Which
yeah.
who knows? But a lot of times, I think that's part of it. Is that
Mhm.
I'm sure there was
Yeah.
somebody lifting that up to the Lord and saying, "God, we need your intercession here." Like,
Mm.
and so I try to remember, like,
Yeah.
there's so much we don't know, when something goes our way or goes or changes or shifts. And I saw that in my life. I wasn't
Mhm.
raised a Christian, but I
Mhm.
know I had people praying for me because I
Yeah.
was living next door to a nun and a priest who
Mhm.
had left the convent and
Uh-huh.
they got married. And then there was a woman down the street who now kind of like my aunt. I call her my aunt, and she was such a strong Christian.
Mm.
And I know they must have been praying for me as a little girl because they knew me from the time I was born on. And there's fruit coming from my life now because of their prayers. So I try to be mindful that it could be that it's in front of us and we're not even paying attention to what people were sowing seeds, years ago.
Mhm.
And so I think it's our job as children of the Lord to pay attention to,
Yeah.
well, there was seed sown over there and there was seed sown over there and who prayed for that and who mentored that. And that was all maybe them listening, most likely them listening to the Lord nudging them to pray
Mhm.
or to do this and do that. So I kind of try to be active and like pay attention to those things now, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is there before I ask my closing question for the collegiate student who's about to, let's say, the senior in high school who's about to
Mhm.
graduate and the senior in college who's about to graduate,
Yeah.
what encouragement could you give them? Because I feel like you have such a beautiful view
Mm.
of them that most of us don't have. So, what would you want to say? And maybe it's a little different because they're
Mhm.
one's younger than the other. What would you want to? How would you want to affirm and encourage them?
Yeah. I think it's what I said my goal is for every student to walk out of Baylor knowing, which is that following Jesus is worth it and it can be a ton of fun. And so for the high school student that is making a post grad decision, and that might be to a 4 year university, but that's not everyone's path or
Right,
even the best path. And so
right,
whether
right.
that's finding a full time job, getting a certificate, going to trade school, staying home and doing community college, um, that following Jesus is worth it, that you're going to experience new trials and new temptations in this next season of your life. That's going to make you question whether or not following Jesus is truly worth it in ways that you
Mhm.
didn't experience necessarily in high school. And the
Okay.
number one thing that the enemy is going to want to try to tell you is that Jesus is ripping you off, that he is
Mm.
no fun, and that he is a buzzkill. Um, but that following Jesus is worth it, and it's a ton of fun. That John 10:10 says that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and
Yes.
destroy, but that
Yes.
Jesus has come to give life and life abundantly. And we get abundant life eternally, but we also get to experience that now. And
Mhm. So
so
good.
you can experience the abundant life through the joy and peace that comes through Jesus that is truly sustaining and long term. That there might be moments like going out and partying, it's fun. And I think sometimes in the church, we're like, no, it's not fun. No, it is fun, but the fun doesn't last forever.
I'm glad
And
you're
that's
honest.
why it's not worth it because you wake up with shame, you wake up with guilt, you wake up with regret for the
Mhm.
things that you've done. And so the world is filled with things that are going to bring momentary fun or satisfaction, but Jesus is the only path that can bring true and lasting satisfaction and fun. So that's true for the high school student, that's true for the college student, that's true for the parent, that's true for our entire lives.
So
And
good.
the number one thing, this isn't necessarily like I wouldn't say it's not biblical. I don't have scripture necessarily to back it up. Is I just want students to feel the freedom, especially
Mhm.
as they graduate college, that your life up until this point, most everything has happened seamlessly. And so you went from elementary school to middle school to high school to college, that there was always a very natural next step. And then I see students that graduate in May and they don't have a full time job lined up. And they're like, I have failed. My life is over.
Aw. Right.
And just mean like life doesn't happen seamlessly. There's going to be stops and starts all along the way. And so
Yes.
if you have 3 months after post grad where you're still applying for jobs or you don't quite know what you're doing, like that is okay.
Mhm.
Or if you're transitioning between jobs or moving cities or anything like that, I think we have just like trained ourselves of my life just has to line up seamlessly
Mhm.
from one thing to the next, and that just might not be your story, and that's fine. That's
That's
okay.
that's so important to let them know that and to encourage them. I mean, I just think it's so cool that you're in this world where you're constantly seeing the transition and the growth and the
Mhm,
questions and the doubt and how I don't have a job or what am I going to
mhm.
do? And we forget when once you graduate and you start to live the rest of your life, you forget what that feeling is like to
Yeah,
be a new adult
totally.
launching and all the pressure and you want to do well and pay your bills and I want to have a job I
Yeah.
like and
Uh-huh.
be near my friends and make new friends and all the things. And I just love that encouragement you said that there's really not one perfect formula, but
Mhm.
stick close to Jesus
Yeah.
and it's at least going to help you find enduring hope and freedom. And you're not crazy if you're scared, if you're scared and you're wondering, how am I going to do this? But that was really good affirmation. I have 3 graduates this year, so I really needed to
Wow.
hear that. I know
Yeah.
I have 4 kids, and my third is graduating high school in May.
Yeah.
Trey is graduating in a week, as you know. He needed the extra
Mhm.
semester from college. And then I have my second who's graduating from college in May. So
Come
it's
on.
just they're all in
Yeah.
different positions. One's
Mhm.
graduating, one's getting married, one's
Yeah.
graduating and not sure where she's living, one's graduating and
Mhm.
thinks he knows where he's going. And it's a lot of change for me as a
Yeah.
mom to watch
Totally.
and go, oh Lord, like, help them.
Step on a season to be praying.
Yeah, yeah.
It's this one.
I'm definitely praying.
Yeah.
So thank you. Like, this could be not a more timely conversation for me personally. So as we close, I want to
Mhm.
ask the question about welcoming people to the Lord's table,
Mhm.
because not all of us know him. Not all of us want to know him. Not all of us trust him. Some
Mhm.
of us think we know him, and maybe we know some, but don't know all. Some people are angry. Some people have been church hurt.
Yeah.
Some people have been betrayed, all the things. So, who do you wish knew that there is room at the Lord's table even for them?
Yeah, I think it's that person that thinks that they have to be perfect before they can come to God,
Mm,
that they have to clean themselves up, that they have to have it figured out, or the person who feels like they have failed. And so,
mhm.
whether it's coming to God for the first time or whether it's coming back to God and being like, hey, I feel like I made this really big mistake and there's no way that He would accept me again. The good news of the gospel is that there is forgiveness for us,
Yes.
and that Jesus did all the work that is necessary. And so, regardless of which of those camps that you're in, there is a space at the table and a seat at the table for you.
Oh, so pretty. So beautiful. So beautiful. And that's the gospel, that's him. He's here for all of us. So you've just been a total blessing, Anna, not to just, me personally for what you've given to my son, but to all the listeners today, and especially the youth who are trying to become adults and growing and wanting to do well and wanting to like themselves. And yet they're scared and they're nervous and they don't know what's coming. So what a beautiful example you are. Thanks for everything you're doing at Baylor and at Vertical. And I just wish you the best. What are your next steps, and where can people learn more about Vertical?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a huge privilege just to come on and have this conversation today and really just been sharing what the Lord has been teaching me. And so if
Mm,
someone learns something from that, then that is a blessing, and just encouraged by you and your faithfulness, even if
no.
as that's what we've talked about of jumping in with this and giving God your yes, even though you don't
Mhm.
necessarily know where it's going. You can know that
Yeah.
you've tried your best and you used everything that you've given, and we're trusting God with where
Yeah.
it's going.
Thank you.
And
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, that's me. I'm like, you don't need to follow me on Instagram. That's fine.
What about, like,
So
Vertical? If they wanna learn,
yes. Oh, yes.
Vertical has
If
a
you want to learn
website,
more
right?
about Vertical, you can follow us on Instagram at Vertical Waco,
Okay.
or visit verticalministries.net, or come hang out with us on a Monday night in Waco, Texas.
Yes. Okay. And then after you get your seminary degree, are you staying at Vertical? Do you think you'll expand and do other ministries too, or do you not know what the next steps are? What's your
Yeah, it's
plan?
vertical for now, vertical until
Awesome.
the Lord says something different. And so, no
So
plans to
good.
leave as of right now.
Well, God bless you, and God bless all the students you're going to come into contact with, and that you are in contact with, and that you have been in contact with, because I can tell that you've been just a beautiful resource and mentor for them too. So I know the Lord is very pleased with what your service has been for his youth. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you.
If you're enjoying the show, remember to share it with a friend. In addition, please like, follow, rate, and review it on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. This really helps listeners find us. You can follow us on Instagram at Room at the Table for You, or Facebook at Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo. And to connect with me personally, email me at roomatthetableforyou@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, friends. And remember, there's always room at the Lord's table. He loves you, and so do I.